If anyone had told me on my wedding day that 7 years later, my husband would leave my bleeding, broken body on the side of a deserted highway just to rush his mistress to the ER for a tiny scratch, I would have laughed in their face. But today, as I lie here in this cold, sterile ICU bed, staring at the ceiling, that horrific scene plays on a loop in my mind. I remember the smell of burning rubber and asphalt. I remember how my white designer dress was slowly turning crimson, soaked in my own blood. I was fading fast, but I still tried to reach out, desperately clawing at my husband's sleeve. I begged him. I sobbed, "Marcus, please, it hurts so bad, our baby, please help me." But Marcus didn't even look back at me, not once. Instead, he scooped Lily up in his arms. Lily, who had been my best friend for years. Lily had a tiny cut on her finger, a minor scrape from the shattered glass, but Marcus was acting like her world was ending. As he carried her away to the backup car, he threw a cold, disgusted glance over his shoulder and said, "Stop being so dramatic, Sarah. Lily is having a panic attack and she's incredibly sensitive. If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive myself." And just like that, he drove off. He left me alone in the dark, bleeding out, expecting me to die. But Marcus and Lily made a fatal mistake. They thought that lonely highway would be the graveyard for both me and my unborn child. They didn't realize that Sarah is not a girl who goes down easily. I survived, and now I am spinning a web of revenge so ruthless that it will strip Marcus and his entire entitled family of every single dollar, every ounce of dignity, and everything they ever stole from me. To understand how a man who swore to love me turned into a monster, we have to go back to the beginning. My name is Sarah. Marcus and I had been married for 7 wonderful, or so I thought, years. We were college sweethearts. When we met, Marcus was a broke junior developer at a failing IT firm. He lived in a cramped studio apartment and survived on ramen. My father, on the other hand, was one of the biggest real estate moguls in the city. When Marcus asked for my hand, my father was skeptical, but because he loved me, he gave Marcus everything. He gifted us a luxury penthouse in downtown Manhattan as a wedding present. He used his immense corporate influence to land Marcus a high-paying executive position at a multinational tech firm. In short, Marcus's entire lavish lifestyle, his 6-figure salary, his tailored suits, his fancy sports car, and his high status in society, was 100% funded by my family. For years, Marcus played the role of the perfect, doting husband. He would bring me flowers for no reason, plan surprise weekend getaways, and whisper promises of forever into my ear. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive, but a wolf in sheep's clothing is hard to spot when you're blinded by love. Then, about a year ago, Lily re-entered my life. Lily was my closest friend from high school, but we had lost touch over the years. We ran into each other at a high-end boutique. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears. She told me a heartbreaking story about how her husband had cheated on her, left her penniless, and how she was currently drowning in debt, living out of her car. My heart broke for her. I was naive, soft-hearted, and eager to help an old friend. I brought her into our home, letting her stay in our guest room completely rent-free. I even begged my father to find a well-paying job for her at one of his subsidiary companies. I thought I was doing a good deed. I thought I was saving a helpless girl. I had no idea I was bringing a venomous viper right into my sanctuary. Lily was clever. She had this sweet, innocent persona that instantly charmed everyone. Within weeks, she became a permanent fixture in our lives. She and Marcus developed a close friendship. Marcus started staying late at the office, always claiming, "Sarah, Lily had a really rough day and was crying at her desk, so I took her out for a drink to calm her down and drove her home." I was so blindly trusting that I actually smiled and thanked him for being so kind to my friend. I never suspected a thing. I didn't realize that while I was asleep in our bed, they were planning my destruction. 6 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. After 7 years of trying and multiple failed IVF attempts, it felt like a miracle. My father was over the moon. He was so ecstatic that he officially announced he was setting up a $5 million trust fund for his future grandchild. When Marcus heard the news about the money, a strange, dark look flashed across his eyes. At the time, I foolishly mistook it for overwhelming joy. The day of the incident was our 7th wedding anniversary. Marcus insisted on a grand celebration. He rented a luxury villa at a resort 3 hours outside the city and invited a small motorcade of his corporate colleagues. And of course, Lily had to come along. I remember the morning of the trip vividly. Lily walked down the stairs wearing a stunning, low-cut red dress. It was loud, attention-grabbing, and completely inappropriate for my anniversary trip. She looked more like the guest of honor than a family friend. We set out in 2 vehicles. Marcus and I were in the lead car, a brand new luxury SUV my dad had bought us, and Lily sat in the back seat. The rest of the colleagues followed in a car behind us. As soon as we hit the interstate, Marcus started driving like a maniac. He was speeding, aggressively weaving in and out of traffic. I clutched my pregnant belly, feeling a sharp twist of anxiety. "Marcus, please slow down," I begged, my voice trembling. "I'm feeling nauseous, and the bumps are hurting my stomach." Marcus didn't even glance at me. He completely ignored my pleas. Instead, his eyes were locked on the rearview mirror, exchanging playful, lingering glances with Lily in the back seat. Lily was giggling, mouthing words back to him. Seeing them share those secret, intimate glances right in front of me sent a sickening chill down my spine. For the first time, the blindfold fell off, and a horrible realization began to dawn on me. But before I could say another word, disaster struck. A massive semi-truck suddenly swerved into our lane ahead. Marcus slammed on the brakes, but we were going way too fast. The tires screeched, the SUV spun out of control, and we crashed violently into a massive concrete guardrail. The impact was deafening. Glass shattered everywhere, and the metal groaned as the front of the car crumpled. Even though my seatbelt was on, the force of the crash slammed me hard against the dashboard, putting immense pressure right on my stomach. A blinding, white-hot pain shot through my abdomen. When the car finally stopped spinning, the cabin filled with smoke. I was slumped over the center console, barely conscious. I could feel a terrifying warmth spreading down my legs. I was bleeding heavily, and the pain in my stomach was unbearable. Through blurred vision, I looked over at Marcus. His airbag had deployed perfectly. He was completely uninjured, not a single scratch on him. I felt a momentary wave of relief, thinking he was going to pull me out, hold me, and call for help. But Marcus didn't even look in my direction. He unbuckled his seatbelt and scrambled into the back seat. Lily was screaming at the top of her lungs, throwing a massive tantrum. "Oh my God, Marcus! Look at my hand. I'm bleeding. I'm going to die." I looked back, and all she had was a tiny superficial scrape on her index finger from a loose piece of glass. It was barely bleeding, but Marcus was panicking as if she had lost a limb. He lifted Lily into his arms and carried her out of the wrecked SUV. With the last bit of strength I had, I reached out through the broken window and caught the edge of his jacket. My voice was a broken whisper. "Marcus, please, the baby. It hurts so bad. Take me to the hospital." Marcus turned around, and the look of sheer coldness and disgust in his eyes made my blood run colder than the air outside. He violently ripped his jacket out of my weak grip. He carried Lily over to the second car, which had pulled up behind us, and was completely undamaged. He barked orders at his colleagues to put her in the front seat. Then, he walked back over to my window, looked down at me, and said in a chillingly flat voice, "You just bumped your head, Sarah. Stop the dramatics. Lily is having a severe panic attack, and she's in shock. I need to get her to the ER immediately. The guys in the other car will call a regular ambulance for you." With that, he hopped into the second car, slammed the door, and sped off into the horizon, leaving me behind in a pool of my own blood. As the darkness started to swallow me whole, I felt my baby kick one last weak time, and then everything went completely still. When I finally opened my eyes, the stark, blinding white lights of the hospital ceiling made my head throb with a vicious intensity. The steady, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor filled the quiet room. For a second, a fleeting second, I forgot where I was. I forgot about the highway, the shattering glass, and the cold metal. But then, the crushing weight of reality slammed back into my chest. I instantly threw my hand down to my stomach. It was flat, covered in thick hospital bandages, but flat. A cold, suffocating wave of panic washed over me. I tried to sit up, but a sharp, agonizing pain shot through my torso, forcing a ragged scream from my throat. The door burst open, and a doctor accompanied by 2 nurses rushed to my bedside. "Calm down, Sarah. You've been through a massive trauma. You need to stay still," the doctor said, his voice laced with heavy sympathy. "My baby," I choked out, tears instantly blinding my vision. I grabbed the doctor's coat, my knuckles turning white. "Where is my baby? Please tell me my baby is okay." The doctor looked down, refusing to meet my eyes. He sighed, a deeply solemn sound that broke the final thread of hope I was hanging onto. "I am so incredibly sorry, Sarah. The blunt force trauma from the crash caused a severe placental abruption. You were bleeding out internally by the time the paramedics brought you in. We had to perform an emergency surgery to save your life. But we couldn't save the child." The world went completely silent. It felt like all the air had been violently sucked out of the room. My baby, my miracle child that I had prayed 7 long years for, gone, just like that. Because my husband couldn't wait for an ambulance. Because my husband thought a scratch on his mistress's finger was worth more than our child's life. I fell back against the pillows, staring blankly at the wall as hot, silent tears streamed down my face. The sadness inside me was vast, a dark ocean threatening to pull me under. But beneath that sorrow, a tiny spark of something else ignited, a dark, simmering rage. "Where is my husband?" I whispered, my voice sounding completely hollow, devoid of any life. "Is Marcus here?" The nurses exchanged a nervous, uncomfortable glance. The doctor cleared his throat. "Mr. Miller came in with the second vehicle shortly after you arrived. He made sure Miss Lily was treated for her panic attack and laceration in the minor injuries unit. He stayed for about an hour during the initial part of your surgery, but then he left." "He left?" I repeated. "Yes," the doctor replied gently. "He said he had to take Miss Lily home because she was too traumatized to remain in a hospital environment. He mentioned he would return in the morning." A bitter, hysterical laugh almost escaped my lips. "He left. My child died. I was sliced open on an operating table fighting for my life, and my husband left the hospital to play nursemaid to his mistress. The betrayal was complete. The man I loved was dead to me, replaced by a monster I barely recognized." Later that evening, my father stormed into the room. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, and his expensive suit was completely wrinkled. The moment he saw me, his tough billionaire exterior completely crumbled. He rushed over, wrapping his arms around me as we both wept for the loss of his grandchild. "I am going to destroy him, Sarah," my father growled, his voice shaking with a terrifying fury once the nurses left the room. "I know what he did. His colleagues told the police that Marcus took the second car and left you there. I will strip him of his job, his money, everything. I will put him behind bars." "No, Dad," I said, my voice suddenly calm, flat, and dangerously steady. I wiped the tears from my face, staring at my father with eyes that had turned completely cold. "If you fire him now, if you sue him now, he gets to play the victim. He will hire a flashy lawyer using the money he stole from us, and he will get away with a slap on the wrist. I don't want him just fired, Dad. I want him utterly ruined. I want him to watch everything he ever dreamed of turn to ash right in front of his eyes. And I want to be the one holding the match." My father stared at me, shocked by the sudden icy resolve in my tone. Slowly, a grim nod of agreement came from him. "What do you want me to do?" "Act like nothing is wrong," I commanded. "Call Marcus. Tell him how heartbroken we are about the baby, but tell him we know it was a tragic accident. Make him believe we don't blame him for leaving me on the road because he was in a state of shock. Let him think he is safe. Let him think his secret with Lily is perfectly hidden." The next morning, right on cue, Marcus walked into my hospital room. He held a massive bouquet of red roses, and his face was twisted into a perfectly crafted expression of grief. He looked like the picture of the year grieving father. "Oh, Sarah, my love," he sobbed, rushing to my side and trying to kiss my forehead. I forced myself not to flinch, allowing his cold lips to touch my skin. "I am so sorry. I can't believe we lost our little angel. I haven't slept a wink. I've been crying all night." "I know, Marcus," I said softly, my voice dripping with fake tenderness. "The doctor told me you had to leave to take care of Lily. How is she?" Marcus froze for a fraction of a second. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes before he quickly covered it up with a heavy sigh. "She's a mess, honey. You know how fragile she is. She kept blaming herself for the crash, hyperventilating. I only left because the doctors assured me You were in stable condition under the anesthesia. I felt so guilty leaving your side, but I didn't want two tragedies on my hands. It was a masterclass in manipulation. If I hadn't seen the raw disgust in his eyes on that highway, I probably would have believed him. It's okay, Marcus. I understand. You were just trying to be a good friend, I smiled weakly, squeezing his hand. Inside, my skin was crawling. I wanted to rip his eyes out, but I forced myself to play the part. We can get through this. Together? Yes, together, Marcus whispered, looking incredibly relieved that his lie had worked so easily. Over the next 2 weeks in the hospital, I played the grieving, fragile wife perfectly. Marcus visited every day, putting on a grand show for the nurses and my father. But what Marcus didn't know was that while he was busy acting at my bedside, my father's private security team was working overtime. On the day I was scheduled to be discharged, my father handed me a thick manila folder while Marcus was downstairs bringing the car around. You were right to wait, Sarah, my father said, his face grim. It's much worse than we thought. I opened the folder. Inside were high-resolution photographs of Marcus and Lily, not just from recently, but dating back to a month before Lily even moved into our guest room. They hadn't re-met at a boutique by accident. It was completely staged. Marcus had been renting her a secret apartment downtown using a corporate credit card tied to my father's company. But the real bombshell was at the bottom of the folder. It was a copy of a secret life insurance policy Marcus had taken out on me just 3 months ago, right after I announced my pregnancy, a policy worth $3 million, with a double indemnity clause in case of accidental death. My breath hitched. The pieces of the puzzle instantly fell into place. The reckless driving on the highway, the constant checking of the rearview mirror, the sudden swerve. Marcus wasn't just trying to get to a resort quickly. He was trying to kill me. He wanted the $3 million insurance payout, plus the $5 million trust fund my father had promised for the baby, which would have legally gone to Marcus as the surviving parent. The crash wasn't an accident. It was an attempted murder. I looked up at my father, my hands shaking, not out of fear, but out of pure, unadulterated venom. He killed my baby on purpose, Dad. He tried to kill me for a paycheck. I've already contacted the FBI, Sarah. We can have him arrested today, my father said, his jaw clenched. No, I whispered, closing the folder as I heard Marcus's footsteps approaching the hospital door. The FBI will take years to litigate this. He will play the insanity card or blame the truck driver. I want something faster. I want him to lose everything he values first, his status, his career, his mistress, and his mind. The door opened, and Marcus walked in, flashing a bright, eager smile. Ready to go home, sweetie. I've cleaned up the whole house for you. I looked at my husband, the man who had murdered my child, and gave him the sweetest, most loving smile I could muster. I am more than ready, Marcus. Let's go home. Walking back into our penthouse felt like stepping into an elaborate theater, where I was both the lead actress and the director of a tragedy Marcus didn't see coming. The air still smelled faintly of Lily's expensive, sickeningly sweet perfume. It was everywhere. Take it easy, sweetie, Marcus said, carefully guiding me to the plush velvet sofa. I'll go make you some tea. Lily dropped off some organic chamomile yesterday before she went to stay at her apartment. She wanted to make sure you felt comfortable. That is so incredibly thoughtful of her, I replied, forcing a soft, grateful smile. Make sure you text her and tell her how much I appreciate it. The moment Marcus walked into the kitchen, my face dropped into a cold expression of pure disgust. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my dad's head of security, Arthur. Phase 1 begins tonight. Drop the bait. That evening, while Marcus was asleep beside me, lying as far away from my surgical scars as possible, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't even need to look at it to know what it was. Arthur had just successfully transferred Marcus's corporate authority at the firm into a ghost account. To the world, Marcus was still the high-flying executive, but on paper, his access to the company's millions was completely severed, routed through a system controlled entirely by my father. The next morning at breakfast, Marcus was frantically typing on his laptop, a deep frown creasing his forehead. Is everything okay, honey? I asked, sipping my coffee. Yeah, just some weird server glitch at work, he muttered, trying to sound casual. but a bead of sweat was forming near his temple. My executive login credentials are acting up. I'm sure IT will fix it by noon. Oh, speaking of work, Marcus, I said, leaning back. My dad called me earlier. He mentioned that, since we lost the baby, he wants to fast-track that $5 million inheritance transfer we talked about. He said it might help us find closure and plan for our future. Marcus's head snapped up. His eyes practically dilated with pure, unadulterated greed. The sheer desperation in his face was pathetic. Really? Your dad said that? Wow, that's incredibly generous of him, Sarah. When did he say the paperwork would be ready? He's hosting a private charity gala this Friday at the Hudson Waterfront Lounge, I said, watching him take the bait hook, line and sinker. He wants us to sign the trust documents there, publicly, in front of the board of directors. It's a formality, you know. He wants everyone to see that the family stands united, despite our terrible loss. Absolutely, absolute united, Marcus stammered, a massive, arrogant grin spreading across his face. He was already spending the money in his head. What he didn't know was that my dad's gala wasn't a celebration. It was a courtroom, and Marcus was the defendant. An hour later, Marcus left for the office, claiming he had an urgent board meeting. The second his car pulled out of the garage, I drove straight to Lily's secret downtown apartment, the one my father's company was paying for. I didn't knock. I used the master key card that Arthur had duplicated for me. When I walked into the living room, Lily was sitting on the couch in a silk robe, sipping a mimosa. When she saw me, her glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. She turned pale as a sheet. "Sarah, what are you doing here? How did you get in?" I walked in calmly, closed the door behind me, and sat down on the armchair opposite her. I looked at the luxury apartment, the designer bags scattered around, all bought with my family's money. "Relax, Lily," I said, my voice shockingly casual. "I'm not here to scratch your face. I'm here to offer you a lifeline." I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, trying to play innocent, though her hands were visibly shaking. "Marcus and I are just friends." "Cut the crap, Lily," I snapped, the icy venom in my voice making her flinch. I threw a copy of the FBI file onto the glass table. Marcus took out a $3 million life insurance policy on me. He tried to kill me in that crash to collect the payout along with my father's $5 million trust fund. And guess what? The FBI is already tracking the corporate credit card he used to rent this very apartment. You are being wrapped up as a co-conspirator in an attempted murder and corporate fraud case. Lily gasped, her eyes widening in pure terror. No, I didn't know about any insurance policy. I swear, he told me he said he was going to divorce you and we would be rich. He lied to you, Lily. He used you as a distraction so he could orchestrate the crash. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. Right now, you're facing 20 years in a federal penitentiary. But like I said, I'm giving you a choice. You can either go down with him, or you can help me put the final nail in his coffin. What do you want me to do?" she whispered, completely broken, weeping in fear. "Marcus thinks he is getting $5 million this Friday at the gala. He promised you a share, didn't he?" I smiled, a dark, ruthless smile. "I want you to show up at that gala. I want you to wear that exact same loud red dress you wore on the day of the crash. And when the time comes, you are going to give a very specific speech in front of everyone." By the time I left Lily's apartment, she was completely under my thumb. She had signed a full written confession detailing her affair with Marcus and his embezzlement of corporate funds in exchange for immunity from the attempted murder charge. Thursday night, the eve of the gala, Marcus came home in an exceptionally good mood. He brought home expensive champagne and toasted to our new beginning. As I clinked my glass against his, looking into the eyes of the man who murdered my unborn child, I raised my glass. "To getting exactly what we deserve, Marcus. Exactly what we deserve, babe," he cheered, downing his drink, entirely oblivious to the fact that his perfect life was about to be obliterated in less than 24 hours. The night of the gala arrived. The Hudson Waterfront Lounge was dazzling, packed with the city's elite, high-profile investors and the entire board of directors from my father's company. Cameras flashed everywhere. Marcus was in his element. He strutted around the ballroom in a custom-tailored tuxedo, shaking hands, laughing loudly and introducing himself as the next managing partner of the firm. He looked completely untouchable. I stood by the grand staircase watching him. I was wearing a sleek, elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the festive atmosphere. My father walked up beside me, slipping his hand into mine. "Everything is set, Sarah. The press is here. The legal team is waiting in the wings. Are you ready?" "More than ready, Dad," I whispered, staring at Marcus. "Let's end this." At exactly 9 o'clock, my father stepped up onto the microphone on the main stage. The ambient chatter in the room instantly died down. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight." My father spoke into the mic, his voice commanding and resonant. "As many of you know, my family recently went through an unimaginable tragedy. We lost my future grandchild in a horrific car accident. But tonight, we are here to talk about the future. We are here to talk about accountability, legacy, and family unity. I would like to call my son-in-law, Marcus Miller, up to the stage." Marcus practically floated up the stairs. He took his place next to my father, flashing a tragic yet brave smile for the cameras. He even reached out and wiped a fake tear from his eye. "It was disgusting." "Marcus," my father said, turning to him, "before we sign the official paperwork for the $5 million trust fund, there is someone else who wants to say a few words. Someone who was there with you on the day of the crash." Marcus frowned, a slight flicker of confusion crossing his face. "Dad, who are you talking about?" "Sarah is right there." Right on cue, the heavy double doors of the lounge swung open. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Walking down the center aisle was Lily. She was wearing the exact same low-cut, loud red dress she had worn on the day of the accident. She looked terrified, but she walked straight toward the stage. Marcus's face instantly drained of all color. His confident posture crumbled and his eyes darted frantically from Lily to me, and then to my father. What is she doing here? Sarah, what is this?" he stammered under his breath, his voice cracking. Lily stepped up to the second microphone. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked directly at the crowd, and more importantly, directly into the rolling news cameras. "My name is Lily Vance," she began, her voice trembling but clear, "and I am here tonight to confess to a crime. For the past year, I have been having an affair with Marcus Miller. He rented me a luxury apartment using embezzled corporate funds from this very company. But that is not why I am standing here." The ballroom went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Marcus stepped forward, trying to grab the microphone from Lily. "She's insane. Security, get this woman out of here. She's having a psychotic break." "Stand down, Marcus." My father's voice boomed through the speakers, freezing Marcus in his tracks. 2 large security guards stepped onto the stage, blocking Marcus from moving. Lily continued, tears streaming down her face. "On the day of the crash, Marcus told me he was going to take care of everything. He told me he took out a $3 million life insurance policy on his wife, Sarah. The crash on the highway wasn't an accident. Marcus intentionally sped up and swerved into that guardrail. He tried to kill his pregnant wife to collect the insurance payout and her father's inheritance." Murmurs of horror exploded through the crowd. Phones were pulled out and camera shutters went wild. "And when the crash happened," Lily sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus, "Sarah was trapped, bleeding to death, begging for her baby's life. But Marcus ignored her. He pulled me out of the car, lied to his colleagues, and left his own wife to die on the side of the road just to protect his secret and his payday. He murdered his own child." "You lying, Petite!" Marcus screamed, completely losing his mind. He lunged at Lily, but the security guard slammed him hard against the stage floor. His expensive tuxedo tore, and his face was pressed against the polished wood. "It's a lie. You can't prove anything." "Sarah, tell them. I love you, Sarah." I slowly walked up the steps of the stage. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I stood right over Marcus, looking down at his pathetic, squirming body. "I don't need to prove it, Marcus," I said, my voice echoing through the entire ballroom. "The FBI already did." With a nod from my father, the giant projector screen behind the stage lit up. Instead of the corporate logos, it displayed the forensic data from the SUV's black box, proving Marcus had actively accelerated before hitting the guardrail. Next to it were the bank statement showing the insurance policy, the signed immunity confession from Lily, and the fraudulent corporate transfers Marcus had made. At that exact moment, 4 federal agents in jackets clearly marked FBI walked into the ballroom. They marched right up to the stage, pulled Marcus up from the floor, and violently yanked his arms behind his back, slapping heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists. "Marcus Miller, you are under arrest for attempted murder, wire fraud, and corporate embezzlement," the lead agent announced clearly. Marcus looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror, realization, and absolute defeat. He realized that the trust fund was a lie, the gala was a trap. I had used his own greed to drag him into the public eye and strip him of his dignity before destroying his life. "Sarah, please, you can't do this to me. I'm your husband," he shrieked as the agents began dragging him down the stage. "My husband died on that highway, Marcus," I said coldly, not shedding a single tear. "You're just the monster who killed my baby. Enjoy your new home." The entire crowd watched in stunned silence as Marcus was dragged out of the gala in chains, sobbing and screaming like a coward. Lily was led away separately by the police, heading towards her own legal reckoning. As the doors slammed shut behind them, the heavy suffocating weight that had been crushing my chest for weeks finally lifted. I looked up at the ceiling, feeling a gentle breeze from the open balcony windows. I lost my child, and the scars on my body would never truly fade. But as I stood there on that stage, surrounded by the ruins of the man who tried to destroy me, I knew one thing for certain. Justice had been served, and the revenge was absolutely sweet. 6 months passed since that fateful night at the gala. The headlines had finally stopped buzzing, but the legal system had done its job with brutal efficiency. Marcus's trial didn't drag on for years like he had hoped. Faced with the black box data, the FBI's ironclad financial trail, and Lily's devastating testimony, his defense team completely crumbled. He tried to plead insanity, he tried to blame the truck driver, and he even tried to claim I was framing him. But a federal judge saw right through his pathetic act. Yesterday, the final sentencing came down. Marcus was convicted on all counts: first-degree attempted murder, wire fraud, and grand embezzlement. Because of the tragic loss of our unborn child, resulting from his intentional actions, the judge handed him the absolute maximum sentence, without the possibility of parole. He will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars in a maximum security federal penitentiary. He entered that courtroom a broke, arrogant fraud, and he left it in an orange jumpsuit, knowing he will die in a concrete cell. Lily didn't escape the fallout either. Although her written confession and cooperation granted her immunity from the attempted murder charge, my father's legal team made sure she was prosecuted to the fullest extent for her role in the corporate embezzlement. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Her luxury apartment, her designer clothes, and her stolen wealth were all seized and liquidated. As for me, I sold the Manhattan penthouse. I couldn't stand to breathe the same air that had been poisoned by their lies. I used the money from the sale, along with the liquidated assets seized from Marcus, to establish a nationwide nonprofit foundation in honor of my unborn child. The foundation funds emergency medical care and legal aid for pregnant women who are victims of domestic abuse and vehicular trauma. Today, I stood on the balcony of my new home, a quiet house overlooking the ocean, far away from the chaotic noise of the city. The physical scars from the surgery had faded into thin silver lines. They would always be a part of me, a permanent reminder of the day I almost lost everything. But the emotional scars no longer burned with pain. They had hardened into a quiet strength. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from my dad. "The Foundation's first clinic officially opened its doors today, Sarah. Your baby is changing lives." A soft, genuine smile crossed my lips, the first real smile I had felt in what felt like an eternity. I looked out at the endless blue horizon, watching the waves crash against the shore, feeling the warm sun on my face. Marcus thought he could play God with my life for a paycheck. He thought he could leave me bleeding in the dark and walk away into the sunset with my family's fortune. But in the end, greed destroys the person who harbors it. I survived the crash, I defeated the monsters, and I rebuilt my life on my own terms. My baby's memory would live on through the lives we were saving every single day. The nightmare was finally over. I am Sarah and I am finally free.